BPE. I mean, a number of issues have come up, and it would appear that this is not just a crisis situation, but we're in the thicket, as it were. So, how does the BPE evaluate, the mess that the power sector is in at the moment? For that is what exactly it is.
Indeed, we have a problem, and I don't think the right thing to do is to run away from the problem, is to face it headlong. And I want to agree, for instance, with Engineer Amadi that we had adopted the shock therapy in order to bring quick results. And I also agree very seriously that we had not managed the anticipation, what we expected to happen. The management was not correctly done. We had hoped that what had happened in the telecom sector will also translate almost directly to the power sector. Meanwhile, they are separate businesses. I want you to understand that power, once generated, must be consumed, and somebody must pay for it once it has been generated. We've been talking about the macroeconomic setting for this particular activity to take place, because the idea was to have an electricity market in which there could be trading between the generators and the distributors, and a lot of trading can go on within the market. The work to bring about this market was eventually not taken very seriously, and macroeconomic situations also compounded the matter. For instance, the projections that were done in MITO were for a foreign exchange that was around 198, I think, at the maximum level, 198 naira to the dollar. It later ballooned to something else. And this particular level of foreign exchange is also, factored into the cost of the product by embed and passed on to the distribution companies. But the distribution companies are not allowed to pass this same effect to the buyers. So liability is building up in terms of, for the distribution company, for a price that they receive but they cannot pass. And therefore, they have to take on these liabilities, and their books begin to look unclean. And that is why they look technically insolvent. Now, when you go to a bank, you want to borrow to meter, you want to borrow to enumerate, you want to borrow to improve on the distribution system, the first thing they will do is they will look at your books. And if the books are in negative, nobody will put his money there. Therefore, the discourse we are put in a situation where they have to collect this power and they have to distribute it and make sure that they pay back the money. Now, the problem is that only a few people are metered. The larger number of people are not metered. You have so many customers. A few customers and so many consumers. The consumers are those who take power without paying. The customers are those who actually take power and pay. Okay. And therefore, you have a problem where you sell the product, but you cannot recoup. So there is a mismatch there that is creating a lot of problems. The discourse cannot invest in the network and make sure that money can be recouped. Actually, if the macroeconomic situation had remained in such a way that the initial trajectory that was given to them, it is very possible we will have gotten there. For instance, when NAC raised the tariff towards 2015, most of the discourse were comfortable with the tariff at that time, and things were beginning to take shape. All of a sudden, certain things came on. Fixed charge was removed, which is a significant portion of their revenue. Subsequently, another drop in tariff came up, and it also threw spanner into the whole tariff situation, such that the amount of money they were able to make could not meet their demands. And the former chairman said, again, there were other macroeconomic problems like increase in salaries and inflation. All these eat up into the ability of the tariff to be able to take care of the operational situations of the discourse. That is not to say we are holding brief for the discos. The discos are supposed to do the right thing. One, they are supposed to enumerate and know the customers that they have in their network. The number of customers, as the number of customers increases, the burden of tariff also reduces. Secondly, they are supposed to meter. And thirdly, they are supposed to make the process of taking power to consumers as efficient as possible. That is what is encapsulated in the A, T, C, and C loss reduction trajectory. All these were affected by the modeling of the economy through the macroeconomic processes that cause a lot of hiccups in the system. Thank you. Like I was saying, we have a problem. We have to look at these issues and come up with solutions that will make sure that we're able to take care of all these things. And Nigerians should also be willing and be ready to make sure that the solutions that are proffered are allowed to take place. For instance, when there was a minor adjustment in the tariff, some people went to court and stopped it, which will have put us in a better level to make sure that this thing works for the betterment of everybody. I think what we need is to be every stakeholder that has serious issues to deal with in the power sector to be in the same room, maybe a kind of a war room, for us to face these issues squarely and seriously and know what you need to do, what NAC needs to do, what Embed needs to do, what every player needs to do at a point in time, and we work in harmony to get the kind of result.
Yes, Mr. Malo, thank you very much. Perhaps people would kick against tariff increase because they are not seeing the electricity, literally. Let me go to Engineer Showumi now. Still talking about this dearth of funding in the sector. Everybody complains about not being paid. The DISCO say they don't have enough money. The TCN will say it gets less than 30% of what it's supposed to get from wheeling electricity in a month. And then, of course, you heard from the GENCOs too. What is happening? Because one would have thought that during the privatization process, you mentioned earlier that these things were sold to the ones with the best business plan. One would have thought that these things would have been projected and then should be taken care of at this time. Okay,
let me just say this. First of all, there is only one source of income into the industry, which is the DISCO. But in simple terms, the amount of money that the DISCO collects does not belong to them alone. An aspect of it goes to transmission, an aspect of it goes to generation. However, the amount with which the service is generated, transmitted, and distributed is slightly lower than the amount to which it's sold. So there is a loss in terms of buying and selling. Now, that means that the amount of money the DISCO collects cannot be efficiently distributed around, which means there will be a shortfall somewhere around the place. And that shortfall is what is responsible for certain aspects of the industry being owed. But having said that, the issue will be really how will these things be resolved. When you look at the MITO, that's the multi-year tariff order, which is the basis, it is a calculation framework for computing the price of power. There is a component, or there are a few components of it that are dollar denominated, one of which is the price of gas. Now, the implication of it is this, like the gentleman from BPE said. If you increase the price of power now by 100% or even 1,000%, as soon as there is a fluctuation in the forex price, that price of power no longer becomes cost reflective, and that can happen within a few weeks. Now, when you look at the technical issues for such a thing, first of all, it does not make proper business sense for you to do your business to generate your business or produce a product or a service in one currency and to sell in another currency, which means that you are producing a business plan that does not work. And those are regulatory fundamentals, which means it is an imperfection within the regulatory system that allows such an input to still exist. And as long as those inputs exist, there will be, the price, the commercial loss will totally and fully exist. So I'm not saying it's an issue that can be solved overnight. Neither am I saying it's an easy solution, but it's an issue that must have a solution for the industry to move forward. There is that about that. Then there is another issue, the issue about design that was talked about. One of the reasons why the telecom sector was more successful and the power was because, you see, both are utilities. Both of them operate within the electromagnetic spectrum. I'm talking technically now. They use the same signals. The sound signals that come from telecoms and the electricity signals fall within what is called the electromagnetic band. In fact, the transmission can possibly take place within the same medium. That's why you can have some electric poles that can also transmit. So there are a number of similarities. But those cannot, and the two can also be broken down to generation, distribution, and transmission. But the difference when you take MTN or Globacom is that a player is responsible for all the value chain. So the person, the generation signals which you have with the generating plant for telephone starts with your voice. That's where you generate the signals from. The transmission, basically is about the same thing. And the distribution is what you have in what they call the base station, which is where it determines whether you have credit and all of that. And all those takes place in nanoseconds. But one person is responsible for it. But in power, you don't have one person being responsible for it. What it means is that one person can be inefficient in his own area and transmit the blame to another person. And the general and listening public, who ultimately are the judge, are not able to know the difference because it's a technical industry. So you don't have a case of one person being, we don't have the case of the buck stopping at one person's table. And those are also fundamental issues. So that's where there can be an issue with respect to the design of it.
So in the power value chain, who is the laggard?
There are imperfections all around. The issue really is not about who is the laggard. The issue is about what's the way forward.
How would for you to understand the way forward, you must know where the problem lies.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You see, when you look at generation, there are imperfections within the generation angle. There are perfections within the transmission section, and there are perfections within the distribution section. And we can start going into all the details, but that will not be the issue, the way forward. The way forward will be that every person basically has certain responsibilities. Within the responsibilities and promises that they made at the point of purchase, we need to go back to the basics and say, you made these promises. Which of them can you be held accountable to? If you are not able to be held accountable to it, what are the issues? How can government support you? How can the public support you? And all that. And then one very, very important factor is the issue of communication. The discourse and the regulator, in fact, all stakeholders owe it to the general public to actually communicate with them in a language that they can understand. Yeah. Because the general and listening public are really and truly not in tune with the fundamental, the basic technical issues that are hindering progress in the industry.
Engineer Showme, thank you very much. I don't think the general public or the consumer needs to understand those technical issues. You use your telephone because of your engineering background. You can understand the electromagnetic and all the issues. I don't need to understand all of that.
All we want to see is the light.
Precisely, and I pay for it, and that's why people keep asking the question. How it's like what used to happen in the days of Nitel. Right. Nitel was a telephone company where you had no more than 420,000 landlines in the country. Then you would say, oh, they can't collect revenue. Sometimes they will give you crazy bills, and so on and so forth. And then suddenly the monopoly was broken, and you had privatization, and you have over 150 million lines now by that. But here we are. NEPA has been broken down. We have discos. This is one question people keep asking. I'm going to put the question on the table, but I want to go first to Dr. Ogaji in South Africa. If you are in business, it is your duty to ensure that you are able to collect money from your customers. Why are discos reluctant to meter their customers so that they can collect revenue? And then we are making excuses for them. They go to banks, they cannot collect. Which bank are you going to? Commercial bank that is charging 30%? All right, Dr. Ogaji in South Africa, let's bring you in again into this conversation. We know that you deal with Gencos. The face of Gencos has been acknowledged. You are owed, you said, over ₦1 trillion. We do not know for how long more you can continue to extend this credit. But when are we likely to see a crisis from your end? Did you get, well, we can see you blip again. My question, Dr. Ogaji, is that you said earlier that you were being owed at least ₦1 trillion. And in the electricity market, your debtor is NBET, but NBET unfortunately can't recoup the money from the discos. So for how long can the GENCOs continue to extend this line of credit before the system crashes?
That's a very good question again, sir. No lawyers will say res ipso loquitur, and it means that the matter speaks for itself. It will not be long, because the businessmen, as you know, about 80% of the generation comes through gas. And gas suppliers are all requesting for 100% payment. They are also asking for pay before service. So you can see that going forward, the sustainability of generation is questionable, with a big question mark with red letter. This is because we cannot sustain the market anymore. Since 2013, you have sustained the market for 5 years. I've said this before. If you have a child, 5-year-old child who has refused to crawl and is still sitting on one position, will you not go and ask either a priest or a native doctor? I think what we need to do, other than this so much specification of this is a problem, this is a problem, from all our discussion, it is so clear that we are lacking some issues. As Dr. Magic clearly identified, he said there is a design problem. So if there is a design problem, we should sit down and redesign the market. For 5 years, we have identified there is a design problem. We sit down and redesign the market. For me, as a Nigerian, the solution I have here is, one, we need collaboration between the private and the public entities, as in the government and the private owners. There is no collaboration. Two, we lack coordination and leadership in the sector. Because if there is no leadership and coordination, how can you find solutions? So first and foremost, we need to put our house in order. The government should put its house in order. The private sector should put their house in order. Then secondly, the other solution before network cuts me off again is for BP and NET to sit down and decide which disco is efficient and phase the discos in phases. The first 4 discos that are efficient should be made to operate on certain conditions with incentives. And then the other discos that are not performing very well should be downgraded and given conditions, CPs, conditions for them to meet before they are upgraded to the efficiency level. If we keep managing failure and saying all of them are discos, most of us, especially in the sector, we are very much aware that not all the discos are efficient. Out of 11 discos, not up to 5 are efficient. Let us tell ourselves the truth and start phasing them. The efficient ones should operate efficiently, and the ones that are not efficient should be downgraded. Then we give them conditions to meet before you upgrade them. How long do we continue with this mass promotion? Everybody must pass to the next class. No. Nigerians need service. GENCOs need payment. We need solution to this problem. 5 years is long enough.
All right, Dr. Ogaji, thank you very much. We heard you loud and clear, but even though the video seems slightly distorted. But we heard you loud and clear some of the points that you have raised. Let's also now listen to the comments of Nigerians. We have a number of tweets here that have come in through our Twitter handle. You can see it there on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen at NTA GMN. We'll just take some of them. Melody Yusuf tweets, "Thank you for bringing this topic up." And now, for bringing up this topic. Now, the situation in Bauchi State is certainly better, or was certainly better in the PHCN NEPA days. No investment by the discos, not to talk of improvement. Even the customer unit doesn't function. If you have a simple problem after 4 p.m., you are on your own.
Saliu Sheu says, please help me ask your guests why I still get estimated billing. And after I stopped paying the bill as a result of extremely poor supply, I was disconnected for 3 months and for 3 months of disconnection, I'm still being billed.
Festus Akimboyewa, there's no doubt that power infrastructure is capital intensive. And with defective distribution systems such as overhead lines, cables, transformers, meters, and other devices involved in the transmission of service to customers, it will take time before we enjoy electricity.
And Omobayo O says, good morning. We have been complaining to IKEDC, that's Ikeja Distribution Company, forever about outrageous estimated bills. They come and disconnect for a week, and the estimated bills never reflect that. Prepaid meter will avoid outrageous bills.
Dele Jack Solomon, the gravity of the past crisis and how detrimental it is to our economy is serious. Now, all government parastatals and divisions from defense to trade and oil and gas, even state and local governments, must join hands in carrying out a multifaceted plan that will rectify the situation quickly.
And one of our regulars, Sonny Michael Omakoji, says, let us continue to deceive ourselves in this country. After 5 years of privatization, consumers are still buying transformers, poles, wires, and other accessories needed for power transmission. Now, what has been privatized? Disco and coal have failed woefully, and they should go away.
Dele Jack Solomon again says it is imperative, if Nigeria is to have electricity, that her pipelines must be protected by the most technologically advanced means possible. Now, that's right.
Of war across the country.
Absolutely,
yeah?
And then I mean, Dr. Samamadi, yes, will talk about, I mean, it would appear that there's a consensus that something went wrong with the execution of the modeling for the electricity market. So they said, okay, let's go back to the drawing board and see what needs to be done. Who should be the key players in returning to the drawing board? And in this case, what do we need to do between what do we need to do in a relationship between the policy environment and therefore policymakers, the regulators, and then the players? Dr. Samamadi.
Well, good question. I think let me even start with the first guy who mentioned about estimated bill. By the time the last tariff that I signed, people forget, under it I said, if 3 months after the tariff is signed, a customer who has paid for meter has not received it, that customer should no longer pay bills. So that brings an issue. There's an aspect of problem of project management, enforcement, compliance. That's one aspect. So it can give us some improvement. But the problem, there's a big problem of design. Now let's get to who can drive it. Obviously, it is government that owns the sector. The policy maker is the Ministry of Power. But one thing I could recommend now is that at the beginning they had what they called the Presidential Presidential Committee on Power, PSCP, which aggregated all the power ministries and agencies, the regulator, the Minister of Power, Finance, and they had regular meetings. That's important. We also had the President Task Force on Power. He talked about coordination. And there's a point he made about the difference between electricity and telecom. It's what we call, unbundling means that you're going to create coordination problem. One person owns the whole value chain. So but once you unbundle, you need sophisticated coordination. And that's what happens in electricity markets, where the so-called TTCN monitors a value chain that has been disaggregated, and there are different incentive structure. So the lack of sophistication in coordination requires that you have to create a synergy, some kind of top-down approach, where you'll be able to have all the agencies represented and communication flows. Thirdly is that many of the remedies need to be regulatorily mediated. And why I say this is important, there is a cure worse than a disease. If a government comes and pluck from the air a policy,
except HIV.
some cure is worse than the disease. You see, what happens, for example, if government makes a policy, take, for example, the cases going on in Ariaria and Sura, those are dangerous. If you say, oh, they're not performing, and you come and cherry pick their network, they can go to court and tie it down because, by the way, you need a hearing process for the regulator to say, look, this is a benchmark. Like I said, this is the benchmark. Now, we give you, show us how you perform. Then if they fail, the regulator can, in a quasi-judicial way, that's why it's like a court, they use their network and say, look, your license is modified because it can't deliver this service. And that's what August said. I've been saying that. I said, after, in 2013, we left to 2015, 2 years after the private. Now, after 3 years, 5 years more, it's the right time to sit back and do a re-evaluation of the discos. The disco is easy to generate without meaning offense to Ogazi. So the fact that you guys are meeting a benchmark, either through a competitive process, not through backyard administrative fiat. Competitive process, get new players. That's number one. Two, there are certain low-hanging fruits, like metering, for example. People are talking about metering, estimated billing. By the time we left, we are closing down to the contract market. We said, all of you must sign up your contracts and start performing. We have, in my view, gone back because most of the discos are not able to perform. So what I think is first and foremost is that create that structure where all the agencies interface regularly because this is a problem-solving solution. Two, be bold enough to, instead of making interventions that are going to give us small, short-term, go into a holistic review of the design of the market in 3 ways. One is fine. Should we privatize all? Secondly, methodology. Third is performance-based. Come with their own asset. They borrowed 100%. So after borrowing 100% to acquire a product, which bank will give you money? to finance recovery of losses. So
Dr.
that's
Amadi,
really
thank you.
a big problem.
Your final thoughts, Mr. Malo, on this issue of going forward. Nigeria, according to the world standard, needs about 160,000 megawatts of electricity. We're generating about 7,000. We can't even distribute 3,000. Industrialization, even the state of life of human beings, of Nigerians, depends on electricity. How do we go forward from talking?
Let me just step back a little, and I will come to that question. Colombia had a worse scenario than what we have. They were able to come out of it through, like the doctor said, a coordinated approach. They had issues of militancy that their distribution companies could not even collect money from consumers. They were able to handle them. And it is doable here. That is where I'm going to.
How was Colombia able to do that? Very briefly.
Colombia came up with schemes that were able to draw in the consumer into what was happening. They saw that they could get obtain value from what was being put on the table, and they bought into it. That is what we need to do. And in order to achieve that, the power sector reform program had also been packaged through the PSRP, that is the Power Sector Reform Program that was anchored by the World Bank, in order to make sure that all these issues are taken care of. Assignments were given to each agency of government what they need to do.
But they have failed.
But the problem is, again, we are back to it, coordination. That was why I said there is a need for us to go back to that war room situation and have everybody that matters to really look at the issue. What are you supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And we do it in a coordinated form that will enable us attend that program. It also involves a situation where there will be a reset for all the key players so that the contract system can play into the market. And then you will be held responsible after the reset if it is properly done.
All right. Yunana Malo off for another 1 hour. We'll still be in the studios, but we only have just a few minutes left for the entire program, and we have our complimentary segments. We'd like to thank Dr. Joy Ogaji, who is the Executive Secretary of the Association of Power Generation Companies. He joined us via Skype. Thanks a lot for being around with us, and we do hope that you have a safe trip back. Dr. Ogaji.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being part of the program.
Thank you. Engineer Olabode Showumi, who is a consultant to the House of Representatives Committee on Power. Thanks a lot for being on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Our appreciation also to Yunana Malo, Director of Energy Bureau of Public Enterprises, that supervised the privatization of the electricity companies.
Thank you very much.
All right. And last but not the least, Dr. Sam Amadi, former chairman of the Electricity Regulatory Commission and now teaches law at Bayes University here in Abuja. Dr. Amadi, thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go over now to our sports desk.
Iceland that retained